welcome to another episode of the Good Book Live with me, Donna Scott. And this week we are discussing the collective power of collections. So putting together a short fiction collection or any other kind of collection for that matter. And I am joined as ever by two awesome guests. I am joined by Jacey Bedford. Jacey, would you like to introduce yourself?
I will. I'm an author published originally by Door in the US and now transitioning to being published by Wizard's Tower in the UK. I've had 7 novels published and 1 republished again so far. And I've taken part in a lot of anthologies, sold about, I don't know, 50 odd short stories perhaps, but quite a lot of those to anthologies. And I'm thinking about doing my own collection, but I haven't quite got there yet.
Lovely. And Karin.
Right. So, hi, I'm Karin Robinson. I am nowhere near as experienced as Jacey. I'm feeling underwhelmed with myself because I haven't written 7 novels yet. I've just written 2, and I'm still trying to get those published. But I have also published a fair chunk of short fiction over the last few years, including several that have been accepted into anthologies. And I am currently in the process of editing together some of my short fiction, most of it previously published, and a few new pieces into a self-published collection that I'm hoping to put out kind of in around October, November of this coming year. So I've been thinking a lot about collections lately and what makes them work.
Great. Okay. So I've called this episode Collective Power. So what do we think collective power means in the context of building a short fiction collection? And do you think a shared editorial vision can help shape it?
Oh,
yeah,
that's a big question.
Yeah, big questions. Start with the big questions. Why not? Let's get
Why
straight
not?
in there. Big questions. Life, universe, everything.
Right. Short answer?
Yeah, short answer.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I am in the process of putting together my collection, which I was just mentioning. I packaged up all my stories and I sent it out to some people to just beta read it as a collection to see if it hung together as a discrete set of things. And people are saying really lovely things about it. I'm getting such great feedback from beta readers saying they think it does hang together. But when I was trying to write the marketing copy, I didn't know how on earth to describe it because they're just stories I wrote, stories for me. Until a friend of mine who'd read several of the stories, she said, "Well, they're all about female empowerment, aren't they?" And I said, "No, it's not. It's not just that. That's too reductive." And then I thought, no, it is though, because they're all about women who are very strong-willed and sort of desperately want or trying to change something in the world. But so I'm kind of remarketing it. I'm sort of like rewriting my marketing copy with that in mind. I'm now kind of giving it a strap line, which is Tales of Women Wanting More. But what it made me realize is that, as writers, if you're doing a collection of your own work, there are always threads that connect them, but they're not always obvious to you. So I think it's actually been a really clarifying process for me to get other people to tell me what they see as the things that unite kind of my voice together, perhaps a little bit, because it is powerful to have some sort of connecting theme. It helps readers to understand what they're getting into. But as authors, maybe we're not always the best judge of that.
Yeah, you know what, that is fascinating, and I can see that. So there's a writer I know called Emma Coleman, and she's part of my writing group, and she just scribbles all the time, and she's very influenced by the locality. So like the rural environs of Northamptonshire, and she writes creepy stories. And we've said to her, so you've actually invented a new kind of subgenre of horror, which is church horror kind of thing.
Oh,
So churchyard horror, because she writes a lot of stories that are set in churchyards and in old abandoned churches, and just she's fascinated by the architectural detail in the buildings and contrasting them with the encroaching nature around the buildings. And it really is wonderful lyrical stuff. So if people want to look up her collection, it's called The Glass House, or The Glass House if you're posh, and that's out with New Compress. But yeah, she's a really, really good writer. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure if she ever thought that she had this thing, like a. I mean,
Yeah.
she's trying to write different things as well, but that is kind of like where she is. That's her
Yeah.
her theme, as it were, and yeah, helping her to put it together, sort of thing. Yeah, Jacey, how about you?
That's really good. You'll have to remind me of the question now, because I
Yeah,
was just kind of riffing on what Karin had said there.
we can riff. We can riff. So when you're putting together a short fiction collection, what does the word or the phrase collective power, which is the title of this episode, what does it mean to
Yeah,
you?
I think, oh God. Basically, the short answer is, if I knew that, I'd probably be rich. So I don't really know what the answer to that is. I mean, when I've been involved in the business end of putting a short fiction collection together, it's been for a purpose. I mean, doing the two Milford anthologies were to fundraise for our Writers of Colour bursary. And we were basically taking short stories that had been published previously, but had gone through Milford at some point, you know, any time in the last 40 or 50 years, I suppose. And so with that aim in mind, we kind of shuffled everything round in that direction. But actually just doing a general short story collection, I would have a great deal of difficulty in saying what made it tick and what didn't. And I'm way behind Karin on putting together a short fiction collection of my own, but I am thinking about it now. And you know, you've got a much better handle on it than I have, Karin. I would basically say that I need to do what you've done now and put my choice of, I don't know, 12, 14 short stories in somebody else's hands and say, do you think there's a unifying force in this? Because I can't see it at all.
Yeah. So when it comes to like putting together collections, so whether you're doing collections, so Karin, you're planning a collection.
Mm.
Um, how are you going to bring that out? Is this going to be self-publishing or a small press? What are your aims?
Yeah, so for my collection, it's interesting. So I have an agent. I'm trying to get a novel published. I've got two out on submission. It's a really frustrating process because it's incredibly slow. And meanwhile, I've written all the short fiction that I'm really proud of. And I think I just had this strong feeling of I want my work out into the world and in a way that I can point people to it and talk to people about it and so forth. So I decided to self-publish this collection of my short fiction so that I would be able to point people to here's my work, here's something of mine that you can buy, read, gives me a good taste of what I'm trying to do. So for me, it was really clear of, you know, I want that out in the world, and this is part of my, you know, almost maternal instinct to say I want to, you know, give birth to my stories and have people out there reading them and having it live in the world. So for me, that was really clear. So I considered approaching small publishers, indie publishers about it, but I just thought, well, that's not the point. The whole point is birthing it and just getting it out there without any other delays, because I've already gone through the process with them of going to, you know, magazines and submitting it that way and patiently waiting and then eventually getting accepted and then waiting for those issues to come out. So this is just for me, it's the satisfaction of putting something out there into the world. So I don't know if that answers your question.
For you, it's going to be better to sort of like self-publish. For that way, you'll be able to sort of like have more
Yeah.
control over it, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's been amazing. So I've commissioned this brilliant artist to do a cover for me, and that's been a process of discovery in its own right. So she's incredibly talented, and she's, you know, she's come back with a concept, and I just thought, oh, I never would have thought to do that, but it looks incredible. So that's been really rewarding in its own way. So you kind of have this sense of I think it's really interesting. I'm now having this feeling of discovering that the publishing process is a creative venture in its own right, which I had not previously understood. That this whole process of figuring out how to package the collection and how to find the link between them and how to write the blurb and the marketing copy for it and create the cover, that also kind of is scratching a creative itch that I didn't know I had. So that's also lovely.
That sounds absolutely fascinating.
It really is. It has been.
So Jacey, I know that you've been putting together the Milford anthologies. How about single author collections? Have you been working on any of those?
No, I haven't done anything yet for anybody else or with anybody else, but like I say, I was planning on a single author collection for me. So far I've only just about got to the stage of putting a collection of stories that I think will work together. I have, well, in fact, I'm still not sure whether to bring this out separately. I've got some trilogies of short stories, which sounds a bit weird, but there you go. So, for instance, I've done an alternate version of Snow White, but it's in 3 completely separate stories. The first one was published by Door in one of their Door anthologies years ago. I think it was almost the first story I ever sold, so it's, like years ago. And then, so that one was from the Wicked Queen's point of view, only she's maybe not quite so wicked. But the second one was from the point of view of the huntsman who takes Snow White into the forest. And the third one is from the point of view of the Short brothers, who are all 6-foot strapping mining types whose surname happens to be Short. So just those kind of, and it's definitely for adults, let's put it that way. And so deciding whether to put that as a whole into an anthology with other stories to back it up, or trying to decide whether to put that into a little unit by itself, there's maybe 16,000 words in it altogether, and just bring it out as a trio of short stories. I'm still trying to make my mind up about that, because I have another trio of short stories which are all related to the First World War. They're different stories from different points of view, but they are all 3 First World War related, and I'd like to bring those out as a little mini collection on their own. But whether they would stand up on their own or whether they need a collection of stories behind them, I don't know. I'm waving my hands about a lot, sorry.
Well, I suppose another alternative what you could do is like you could write some stories that are previously unpublished but which go with the theme. So there's that choice. Would that be something that you would consider? Maybe have a all fairy story, or
2 of the Snow White stories haven't been published, mainly because they are a middle and an end, and the beginning is the one that's been published. So if I did bring that out as a trilogy, it would be 1 pre-published story and 2 new ones. And I've got 1 or 2 other fairy tale-ish stories that might go with it quite nicely. Although when I was looking at the stories that I wanted to put together, there was a vast kind of variety of stories, from fantasy to science fiction, and even a couple of mild horror ones. I don't write much horror, but other people have told me they're horror. I just thought they were dark fantasies.
yeah, that's what I do in mine. So people come to my stall and ask, "Is that I'm into horror?" And so like I say, well, I've got a folk horror and I have a dark science fiction,
Right.
which has horrific elements. So I'll tell them that. And it's like sometimes I go away with both copies, which is nice. It's like what it's a genre, but what is going to appeal to a reader of that genre? It's nice to be the purest of that genre. But so do you think a unifying purpose or theme can help the individual stories speak to each other across the collection? I'll ask you that one, Karin.
Yeah, I do actually, and I'm always very happy when I see a call for anthology stories along a particular theme, because I often find it very creatively unlocking. So the very first short story I ever succeeded in getting published was one that I saw the call out go for stories on lesbians in space. And I laughed out loud because I thought that sounds hilarious. That sounds like a really fun thing, but I haven't got any lesbians in space story. And by the time I think I read it on the tube, and by the time I got to my destination, I had an idea for a story, wrote it, over the next couple of days, and it was my first story that I ever got accepted, because I think sometimes pointing your mind in the direction of a theme can start to make things happen in a fertile way. And I think the same thing happens for readers too. You start to think, okay, well, if just to take the Lesbians in Space example, if you look at the first volume of Lesbians in Space, there were some stories that were kind of like really fun pop culture, boy band style, about celebrity, and then there were some that were more sci-fi and more darker, but you sort of start to think about the connections between them. So I love a theme. I think it really does unlock things for people. I also think it helps readers understand if it's going to be for them. And frankly, I think, getting people to pick up and read short stories can be really challenging anyway. So it helps if you give them a nice entry point. So I remember the editor of that anthology telling me that their experience has been that sapphic stories sell really, really well. So they kind of almost went, well, we're just going to give the people what they want. That all the sapphic things they'd put out before had sold really well. They put out Lesbians in Space, and it again just met where their audience was and what people needed. So I think you kind of need to do everything you can to give the stories the best chance to find their reader, and a theme is one way of doing that.
Yeah, I do love a call for submissions. It gets me writing, even if
Yeah.
I don't end up making the submission deadline, but it gets me writing. That's good. Then hopefully something will come along that matches, because I'm very slow at writing and I often miss the deadlines. Okay, so Jacey, how do you feel about themes in general then? Do you
I
think they help?
I do like writing to a theme. I've been a part of, I'm just counting now on the bookshelf, 7 of the anthologies that were published by Zombies Need Brains in the States. And
Love
I've been
that.
a core author for 7 of those. So there's it's not so much a call as an email arrives and says, will you be a core author and you need to write a story about about 6,000 words long. And that, yes, it does get me thinking about short stories. In fact, the very first short story that I sold, which was to an Door anthology entitled Warrior Princesses. And I just looked at the title, and that wasn't an invitation. It was a question of sending a story in. And I knew the editor. And I said, "Oh, warrior princesses! I can't exactly write a short story about warrior princesses, in armor." And and she said, "Oh, just give it a go." And so I did, and I wrote 2 completely different ones. One of them was a twins separated at birth story, which I'm told you can't sell at all, because I didn't know you couldn't sell it. I sold it. And then I wrote a really silly one about warrior princesses who worked for an Amazonian agency, kind of doing odd jobs as warrior princesses. And I sold that to a magazine later. So, it worked, just having that concentration on what to do. But I mean, the Zombies Need Brains anthologies have been everything from, I'm just looking now, alien artifacts and the Bar second round. And I mean, that was just a bonkers idea. It was that Gilgamesh runs a bar which is eternal, and the stories have to take place and have something to do with this bar. Okay, so I set one of my First World War stories in Gilgamesh's bar, and yeah, I would never have thought of doing that if I hadn't had the email summons, if you like.
Yeah, and I also think as well, having a little bit of constraint, a little bit of boundary, sort of makes you really want to push against it and see what else you can do with it. I find that as well with poetry. So, like, if you're giving something with a form, like a villanelle, and it's like it's got to be this long lines and this got to be repeated. It's like, yeah, and then you think about one of the best poems in the world, "Do Not Go Gentle into Like Good Night." It has that really tight structure, and I think that's what can happen if you are inspired and also annoyed by a theme boundary.
Yeah. Well, you think about, I think about the Flame Tree Press, they do these beautiful volumes of single volume stories about individual mythological characters. And they're absolutely gorgeous, but you would think that's such a constraint. You can only write about one character. I actually got a story into the Helen of Troy anthology, which is coming out in September. But again, because the constraint was so tight, my brain went straight down the path of, okay, Helen, what do we know about Helen? What are the different things you can explore with her area? And one of the things I thought about Helen was just doing a tiny bit of research on her was you realize the character after the Trojan War just goes back to Sparta and she just lives as Queen of Sparta after all that's gone on. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What would that be like? Menelaus and her as husband and wife after she's run off and all that's gone on. And it just kind of again, it poured out of me. I thought, yeah, I know exactly a way in. Helen, when she's older, when she's Queen of Sparta, when she's it's taken the edge off her beauty a bit. And then also maybe she's sort of found her way a little bit because in the stories, in the mythology, you never quite get an angle on Helen. And I thought, well, maybe in older life, as lots of women do, she's kind of come into herself a little bit more and she's, in more control of her beauty and her power. So I wrote that story and I thought, well, brilliant. I would never in a million years have thought I want to write a story about Helen of Troy, but when given the opportunity to do so, I found something that I was really excited about within it.
And the thing is that you give 10 authors the idea that they've got to go away and write a story about Helen of Troy, and you will get 10 completely different stories.
Yeah.
And in the so I'm still going through, and I will finish this week. My anthology, Screams and Wales, for the Slab Press, which is Screams and not Wales the country, or Wales the creature, but Wales the screaming, which is the metal horror anthology. And there have been, I think it's one of the most popular themes I've ever had a call for. And it's just been hundreds of stories, and it's something that really speaks to me. So I was like, this is very niche but narrow thing that I'm after.
Yeah.
And people go, yes, I'm going to send that in.
And have you found that you've been able to, I mean, I'm sure there will be stories that you've just rejected out of hand, but have you found that most of the stories that you've been sent have actually stuck to the theme and would fit in with your ideas to start off with?
Well, I did have some people saying, I've got a story for you, but it's not based on metal or rock.
Right.
It's about jazz. And I was like, or blues. And I'm like, there have been
not what we asked for.
So I've read, what did I read? Maria Reagan's story about a haunted harmonica. That was blues. And I was thinking, okay, what if it's good like that? Maybe I'll consider it. But it needed to be more metal. I wanted something to speak to me about music. So if it speaks about music, it can maybe there are things that transfer from jazz to rock and vice versa. So it's anyway. I've got some good stories. You see an awesome call for submissions for an anthology, and it says, "I want so many words on this theme," and you think, yes. Now, do you trawl your back catalogue for a story you've already written, or do you write to that theme? Are you more inspired to write to that theme, write something new? Or can you basically go through your back catalogue and find something if you're that prolific at writing?
Yeah, I mean, if I've got a story, if I don't have a fresh idea for a call and I've got a story in my trunk that would fit, I might give it a go. But I usually find it's more successful if I write something custom to the ask because it's more likely that I'm vibing with what they're looking for, in my experience.
I had the very galling experience of selling a short story, which was absolutely perfect for a call that arrived 2 weeks later.
Oh,
and I couldn't,
so
I couldn't send
frustrating.
it again. But I sold it. It was great. It was lovely to be able to sell it. And then I got this inquiry, would I write to this theme? And it was like pulling teeth because I'd already got the perfect story for that theme. And I did try and write a story for it, but it didn't really work, and well, I've still got it lurking there somewhere, but no, it didn't really work. I do prefer to write to order. No two ways about it. It gets me going, really. Gives me an incentive, gives me a kick up the bum to write something to order.
I mean, I did have one story that I wrote years back, which was about a haunted beach house. And it was a sort of holiday story based on a real experience my family and I had when we went on holiday in the Isle of Wight, and we struggled to figure out how the levers of the shower and the downstairs bath worked. And I was like, what if it was an ancient haunted spring, and getting it in the right combination of which dial you turn in which direction summoned demons. So I thought I quite liked that idea. I wrote the story and nobody wanted it. I pitched it everywhere because it's my husband's favorite story that I've ever written. So he was like, "Oh, just send it to more places. Somebody's going to buy it." I finally did manage to sell it, and it's actually coming out soon for a publication from Iron Fang that's specifically about travel horror. So it did get there in the end, but I submitted it to a couple of travel horror calls before that, thinking, "Oh, it's perfect. This is exactly what they're looking for," and didn't get accepted. So you never know.
No. Well, the thing about it is, you might submit something that's absolutely perfect, but another 90 people might have submitted something that's absolutely perfect as well. And,
Yeah.
your story landing on the right desk at the right time is what counts, really. And maybe, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm never sure what sells stories. Everybody says, oh, if you're going to sell a story to XYZ magazine, then you need to know what type of stories they buy. So I read the magazine and I think, I still don't know what
There's
type
no
of
pattern.
stories they buy. No, there's no pattern.
What's an Interzone story, for example? They
Um,
publish so many different things.
I have never yet sold a story to Interzone. I have sent a few over the years, but I've never yet sold them one. I've done better with anthologies than I have with magazines.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, ditto. Ditto. I think it's probably part of the reason why I love putting them together as well.
Mm.
It's like, I love the opportunity. Let's share the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
What are some great solo collections or anthologies that you have encountered as a reader?
Jane Fenn's done a really good one, and Liz Williams as well.
Yeah. So Jane, is that Strange Attractors?
Yeah, and I'm just trying to remember what Liz's one was called. I can't remember the name of the anthology now. I should look it up, shouldn't I? But she did a collection. I think she did it with Ian Waits.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe I can see the cover. It was covered by Anne Sedworth.
It was, yes, absolutely. A gorgeous cover.
In my pile behind me, lots and lots of collections, including Sparks Flying by Kim Lakin. And oh yes, The 1,000-Year Reich by Ian Watson.
Ooh.
And quite a few Tanith Lee ones as well. I'll always have Tanith Lee in my heart. And I think there's things I've always loved since I was little, well, very young, including Angela Carter, like The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories. Now that's a great fairy story themed collection.
Oh, the Bloody Chamber is amazing. Really changed my world when I read it when I was younger.
Yeah. So Karin, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think. I feel like the most of the anthology the collections that come to mind for me are sort of older as well, but Kelly Link's Magic for Beginners is one that I go back to over and over again because it's just wonderfully bizarre, and you never could follow the twists and trails of her brain, and then you come out the end of a story and you think, wow, what a thing to do.
That is a good one. I particularly like the library story in that one. Yeah.
So good. And then I think it's going to sound like a cheat because I think people wouldn't call him speculative, for example, but Jorge Luis Borges writes these amazing twisty turny, which I think are speculative stories, but they would be classed as literature, which I absolutely love. Again, classics. And then I just finished recently, I just read Ted Chiang's collection, Stories of Our Life, of Your Life, which was the film Arrival was based on. And there was some beautiful work in there that I knew that story to look out for, but there was lots of other stories in that collection that really took me to all sorts of fabulous places.
Please do consider subscribing to the Good Book Life podcast, either on YouTube or on one of your many audio platforms. And if you can, please give us a good rating there as well. And like and subscribe and all of that. Okay, so let's see what we've got going on. Jacey, what have you got going on right now?
Well, the main thing that I've got going on is republishing my original Sci-Tech trilogy, which came out with Door. Is coming out with Wizard's Tower. So the first one came out at EasterCon, which is Sci-Tech, and the second one is due out at BristolCon. And I've just spent the last week de-Americanizing the text because, of course, I wrote it in British English, as you do. And the publisher turned it into Americanized English, and now I'm having to turn it back. Oh my goodness, I just did not realize how complicated that was going to be. But I have now done it, and Crossways will be coming out at BristolCon. And then the third one, Nimbus, will be coming out at EasterCon next year, which is great. But also at EasterCon this year was the Milford anthology, which is the most recent Milford anthology, Hidden Shadows. And we were talking about covers, and I'm not quite sure how well you can see this one. But Brian Ledyard, who did my cover for Sci-Tech, also did the cover for the Milford anthology and used the Milford logo. And I think that's just fabulous. I really, really like it. So yeah, and it's got some good stories in as well. So yeah, those were the two projects that I've been most involved in most recently.
Great. Okay, and Karin.
So my couple of things going on. The Helen of Troy anthology, which I mentioned, is coming out next month from Flame Tree Press. So have a look out for that. There's absolutely beautiful editions, so I'm always happy to promote them anyway, even if I wasn't in it. So I'm also, as I say, working on getting my my own collection up and running, which I'm hoping to release kind of late October, just in time for Halloween, if you're that way inclined. That's going to be called Visions and Hauntings, with a subtitle of Tales of Women Wanting More. And you can find out more about that. I'll be posting about that as we go along on my Substack, which you can look at Fantasy and Politics, or just Google my name and I'm sure it will come up.
Great, thank you. And I would say to any writers out there, please do check the slab.press for any of our calls for submissions. We've currently got one opening at the end of the year for Pyrite, which is our space heist anthology. So what we're looking for is stories that sort of mix Ocean's 11 with Blake 7, that kind of thing. And I have an anthology coming out at the end of the year, which is The Collective, which is, so I've got a piece in here. This is by the Lunar Press. This is non-fiction, and it's edited by Dan Coxon and Pete Sutton. And I talk about putting together best of British science fiction. So this is the latest one out with New Compress as well. So you can see some good names in there. Look at all those names, lovely names.
Fantastic.
So yeah, that it's an ongoing project. That is also, I'm looking at stories now for next year's. So yeah, send them to me. Right. Okay. So thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you again. And I will only have a few of my to edit out this time. I'm pretty sure. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been a
You're very
pleasure.
welcome. Okay, thank you. Okay,
When-
bye. As I also remind them that if you like these conversations, please do consider subscribing to please do consider
Good Book
subscribing
Life.
to yeah. I say I can't. I'm wearing the HRT patches. I don't, what else can I do? What more can I do?